Welcome to the Internet of Sovereignty. Welcome to Pangea.
Hello everyone, thanks for coming. I'm glad that you all came here and found the way to this meetup. So in case you haven't been to our last meetup, where we introduced Bitnation in general, so Bitnation is basically, let's say, a way that, or a platform that gives you the tools to create your own governance services that are independent from nation states. So we build the very infrastructure on top of which you will be able to create your own virtual nation, which is decentralized, borderless, and voluntary. So this way, we can have governance services that work in the way we already live on the internet today. We are already globalized. We do travel. We do live in multiple countries, and we're not restricted by geographical territories. So there's this big geographic apartheid imposed on us. So there's this big geographic apartheid imposed on us by the international oligopoly of nation-state governments. Basically, by the fact, which is totally arbitrary, on where you have been born, you are forced to accept these governance services by this local government, and you cannot opt out without having to leave behind your friends, your family, your culture, your language, your everything, just to choose a different governance service provider, which is obviously a bad service, right? So we already learn in school that monopolies are bad, and we see that governments are fighting monopolies everywhere, just not for themselves. So basically with Bitnation, we give you the chance to create governance services that are completely independent from all of these, based on blockchain. Maybe you heard about it before. So it's a way of recording data, contracts, information, and so on that cannot be manipulated because it's distributed in the network of decentralized servers. And you don't have to trust any intermediaries anymore, like governments or Facebook or Google or whatever. So you just... Hello? Yeah. So you just create these services that you think that people want to use, and you start a peer-to-peer web of trust. And so one of the fundamental things of using governance services is ID. And what we now, with our first iteration of the Pangea platform that Bitnation is creating right now, is a software that is utilizing blockchain. Hello? Yeah. Blockchain ID is very essential to be able to use any of these governance services that we are creating. So a fundamental aspect of this is whether blockchain identity or Bitnation passports, for example, could be accepted by nation-state governments, and how we go about living in this nation-state system that is imposed on us as virtual citizens, as world citizens. So as guest speakers today, I have Sonja and Kenneth, who are also from Bitnation and who have more experience in legal services than me. And they can tell you about some instances of where people crossed borders to show that it's actually possible to live without nation-state papers.
All right, hello everyone. Kenneth here, Bitnation. We, the legal team, Sonja, who's here too and will speak, have previously been working with sending people across borders that are either existing or not. That was kind of a special case that is a little different from the Bitnation. The most important thing we know is what kind of punishment one can expect from doing illegal border crossings. We're talking about this because we are making passports soon for Bitnation, and of course, from our activistic perspective, it's we should be free to travel anywhere with any ID. But of course, we know it's impossible. So we must try what we can to challenge these systems. When we worked in Liberland with this, We sent people from Serbia into Croatia, but that was more for testing some legal aspects of that project. But it's fairly without risk doing these border crossings with your own passport. Actually, if you're an EU citizen, you might have some trouble with a Bitnation passport, but this is what we want to go out and test. If you have your own passport with you, you can identify yourself, and as an EU citizen, that shouldn't be a problem. For people out of EU and on a world level, there is so many different regulations all over, and this is one of the reasons why it's very important to have a diplomatic network where people who are locally placed help with other Bitnationers who are in trouble for any reason. So if there is a problem in Spain, we would like to have the Spanish ambassador helping us with the local regulation, or even help us before someone does something stupid. So, and I, in the case of Liberland, it was my job to basically send people to prison. We sent about 50 people to prison, all deliberately, and had around 30 court cases, which is what Sonja, as the lawyer from of Liberland, were handling. So she was getting the people out of prison again. And maybe we're going to continue that kind of having that kind of team in Bitnation in the future, especially now when we have these passport and border crossing issues coming up. So, but I'll let Sonja maybe explain a little more of the legal situation of both the Liberland project and the problems we can have in Bitnation.
Hello, everyone. I hope you will have some questions for us. As Kenneth already mentioned, it's not so easy to go through the borders without documents, even though we have ideas that we believe in freedom and we are free to travel. Without proper documents, you can be easily fined and end up in the prison. All countries have regulations for sure and will be very strict. But we are trying through Bitnation to create documents that even if people end up in some kind of legal problems, that will be proof enough to be validated in each and every jurisdictions as certain proof of identity. What will this be? We still have to define the requirements, what we want to do as a Bitnation, not what all the regulations of all existing jurisdictions are telling us, because we want, as a Bitnation, to provide something new together with technology, which is not implemented in the same way in existing jurisdictions, especially if our identity is connected with blockchain and QR codes, and we will see how we will handle it. What we want to do is to create in each and every country, like now you are listening here in Spain, but we want to go in every country of the world and to create Bitnation embassies, which will be provided complete information, what we are doing, how we are doing, and what is our plan, and how to confront potential legal issues depending on the different regulations, and that we all cooperate and update ourselves and to help each other when people are having different problems from legal perspective. And we need your help. We need to persuade you that nothing bad will happen, but we have to that we have to go through this, that it is normal. And of course authorities will always have certain issues whenever people will try to do something different. But we believe that Pangea, as the new jurisdictions, will provide for every citizens of this world that they don't need their system anymore, and that the power of technology is strong enough to be justified at least in one jurisdiction, it will be enough, and we will try to find the most appropriate ones as a beginning, to try to see how to get recognized in a way, not only by joining more and more people, but also to show that we are not coming in some aggressive way, but we want to just use our rights as people on this planet. This is in short, but I would like to hear your questions. I don't know, we are inside of Bitnation, we are working with this every day, we are talking a lot and discussing what to do, how to do it, and we would like to hear people from outside, what interests them most and what are they afraid of, and so that we can answer and that we can provide you help. We are all team of professionals, like from legal to technical, and we are trying to use our skills to make something better for everyone.
All right. So as Sonja said, we want to have a discussion with you. So please go ahead and ask us like all questions concerning, let's say, legality and how to use what we are creating actually in nowadays world. So if you want to go ahead.
It's a practical question, not about legality, not about these administrations we may dislike or whatever. It's about the people, for instance, in Europe. How will they take, if this thing could be approved, that, let's say, in the next 5 years, about 200 millions in Africa, about 200 or 300 millions, 200 millions in China, 150 millions in India, 50 millions in South America or more would like to come to stay in Europe. I mean, how you go about that? It's a fact. I mean, economic migrants are in that order in the next 5 years. In 10 years, probably 3 times that. I mean, can Europe sustain an income of people of 500 million or 1,000 million who want to live in Europe for obvious reasons?
So, just if I understand the question, it's about immigrants coming to Europe based on, for instance, Pangea passports.
Yeah, exactly. So that's also how I got it. Basically, the freedom of movement of people from all over the world, like how will it affect our situation in Europe?
Yeah. First of all, it's for sure that that the European Union won't accept these passports, especially not when it's non-EU citizens. This is why we can start out lightly in our tests by using EU citizens to make light tests and not to put people in too much danger to begin with. But the problem that we discuss, how about immigrants? Well, from a European perspective, it is kind of solved just due to European regulation. Besides from that, it's a good question, but I don't see a problem for Europe if that was the question.
The question is about the too many people coming in. The problem of over-immigration. I think that was the question.
And not in relation to identifications of in Bitnation.
Well, to me, everybody should be allowed to live where they want. Nobody ought to say, "Oh, what we do in over-immigration." That's not our problem. That's not anyone to say that we cannot have.
No, I totally agree. The problem we have in Europe is not whether we want immigrants or not. It's a financial question. We're being taxed, and therefore, because this is the exact thing we want to achieve. It's freedom, that anyone should go anywhere they like as long as they're not hurting anyone, and that's the whole philosophy. The practical political implications. There are so many variables that I don't even know if we should try and find solutions for it, because we are simply just kind of turning our back on these systems and saying we're doing our own thing. And in this process, we would like to be able to move around and test legal aspects of a virtual state. Immigration problems in Europe, or depending on how you want to formulate it, is a question about the relationship between foreigners and the very top of the European Union Parliament. None of us have anything to say anyway when it comes down to it.
And I would also add that essentially we're all humans, right? I mean, we make this artificial divisions between who's German, who's French, who's Polish. I mean, all of this collectivism, all of this like divided thinking makes us very easy for like this divide and conquer process, you know, that the people who rule us can rule us much more easily because we just fight each other, because we live in this paradigm of seeing people not as humans, as equals, but we put them in categories and these nationalities and on these limits that they impose on us. So instead of embracing, let's say, a more equal paradigm of seeing everyone as humans, we should not, you know, go on in this fight and fight each other for some categories that they impose on us and that we didn't voluntarily choose to live by. With Bitnation, we can for the first time actually choose ourselves in what kind of collectives we want to live, and not in the world that was imposed on us just because we were born and it was like this before. Now, for the first time, we can take action without asking for anyone's permission.
What's your medium or long-term plan of the nation strategy?
So the question was, what is the medium or long-term plan for Bitnation? So yeah, essentially the idea is that yeah, we grow and grow, and we want to be actually as big as Facebook basically one day. We want that everyone who is doing businesses, who is doing agreements, will use Pangea to have legal security in their negotiations, and to use a decentralized infrastructure and a voluntary one instead of the government system that is imposed on us just because you happen to be born in one place or not.
It's a case that I have seen that there was already a tested system of mobile bank ID in Sweden that was not based on blockchain, but seeing that it had so much success in the country, there is a coin already called Civic that uses blockchain to do identification not only for persons but also for enterprises. So everybody can identify with it supposedly and use it as an identification mean, not only for persons but for many things. So I was wondering if you already know of the existence of this coin, if you see it as a competence, or you see it as something that can be useful, or what is your position to this coin?
So the comment is that in Sweden there's a mobile banking system which gives unique identifiers not only to people but also to enterprises and to things, and that they released some sort of coin and how Bitnation is going to use that. So essentially Bitnation is not choosing what to use or what not to use. Anyone can create a virtual nation, a DBVN, on top of our Pangea platform, and you yourself can choose whether you and your virtual nation want to use this currency, for example, or not. Also, every creator of virtual nations will be able to create a new currency or ERC20 token himself. So you will be free to choose what kind of currency to use, and we're essentially just providing you the tools to design your ideal nation yourself, which will be competing with other voluntary nations. So what we do is we make it much easier for people to opt in and opt out from different governance structures. So you don't have to move geographically to use or to try a different governance system or a different economic system, for example. You can just use your mobile app to actually move from one nation to another. Also, when it's possible, you can also be a member of or a citizen of different virtual nations. They could just be providers of individual governance services. We tend to think of government as this big bulk of services, but actually with the nations that are created on Bitnation, you can also see it as individual service providers. So you can split it up into all the different things. Like, for example, now we focus on the legal services, like notaries, dispute resolution, identification. All of these things, they would be provided all together by one government, but you could use these things that are provided by Pangea, but you can also use different services by other nations. So you don't have to take like the one-size-fits-all model that you have today. You can have different services from different nations. You're not forced to be citizen only of one nation. You can be also a citizen of multiple nations. So yes, the answer is that you can create your own nation where this coin would be accepted, that this would compete with other virtual nations. Yes?
How would legal litigation among nations on Bitnations work if you have a specific governance that people agree to, but if you come into conflict with someone who's not, who is from a different one, how do you litigate?
Yeah, so the question is how legal litigation is working between these different virtual nations, and how disputes are resolved basically when there's conflicts between citizens of different virtual nations, and I assume probably also for citizens that are not member of virtual nations. So first of all agreements on Pangea can only be made between citizens that use also Pangea. It cannot be done for people that are not on this platform. So we do not resolve disputes between people that are not members of Pangea, obviously. So because whenever you make agreements on Pangea, you already before, like when you do the smart contract template, choose an arbitrator who will be responsible for resolving this dispute. And it should be an arbitrator that both parties agree on. And yes, but for the question on how different virtual nations resolve disputes amongst their citizens and amongst each other, I believe there could be some mechanism like we have today between insurance companies. Like there could be, like, let's say, some back insurance, let's say, between two different governance service providers that resolves, or to have, like, let's say, a standard on how to resolve these disputes, or maybe that there could be like already specified arbitrators for these conflicts, like between nations. But we believe that the people will themselves come up with solutions. We do not impose any solutions on them. We believe that the market of ideas will bring about the best solution for everyone. But Kenneth, Sonja, what do you think? How could legal litigation between virtual nations work?
I think there's might already be people trying to make projects. But for instance, we have UN, and there we also have UNPO, which is kind of a collection of unrecognized countries. On top of that, I'm not sure if they fit the concept of virtual countries. So there's maybe an opportunity to actually create projects that would join these virtual projects. Yeah. The basis of it is there's probably not too many of them, so I think there's a lot of advantage in having some cooperation, definitely.
So do you want to add anything to this, or?
Yeah, so I repeat the question again, or not the question, the comment. So basically that in today's world, we have constitutions between the different nations and in each different nation, and that these constitutions are also based on culture, and that there's also, apart from economic litigation, many other crimes that are resolved so differently in each culture. And how would this be resembled in world of virtual nations like with Bitnation? So first of all, I want to say that with virtual nations, you will be able to live in a, let's say, more globalized culture with like living in a like virtual realm with people who are like-minded, not based on your geographic place, but more on like on what you identify yourself with, like with certain ideologies, maybe with a certain interest in music. It could be anything, literally. So you will be able to pertain to a more international reflection of culture, not to a limited local one. But you can still choose to be part of this. For example, we have one founder of a DBVN who wants to create Global Andalusia, which would be, let's say, a global Andalusian digital nation, where Andalusians in the world like help each other and try to resolve disputes, but also to embrace the culture of Andalusians for people who are not Andalusians. So it's somehow opening up culture for everyone in the world. And I believe, yes, things like murder, for example, or things, yeah, like other crimes that are not related to contract law, for example, that we are still not able to resolve them, of course. But I think in the future there would be also some way of how to do this on in an international way, and also at the same time, like I said before, whenever you make any agreements with someone else, you choose an arbitrator who's specified in a specific code of law. And when you, for example, make contracts with someone who, for example, believes in Sharia law, you could choose an arbitrator who specializes in that, and disputes would be resolved in that way, just the way they wanted it. So you would have competing legal codes, and anyone can choose themselves like what kind of legal code they want to adhere to for their specific agreement. So yes, depending on which kind of people you deal with, you already said before like what kind of outcome there will be, and they maybe depending on which cultures they adhere to, the parties in this conflict, they will also choose this kind of law. Maybe if they're from different, completely different cultures, they will choose a more, let's say, rational one or a more objectified one. But if they if they both are part of some religion or part of some local code of conduct, let's say, they would prefer an arbitrator that also shows this way of solving disputes like they are used to do it, and they could choose it themselves. So. Depending on who you do your business with or who you communicate with, you choose the, let's say, best fitting code of law. Yes?
You just mentioned company law as opposed to the type of litigation. One question. Let's say in little time, the Europe community as an entity would accept that someone registers a company in Bitnation. Would that be possible in the near future?
Yeah, so
it's accepted in Europe law. My company doesn't want to be, it has to be in Bitnation, not in Europe.
Yeah, so the question is whether companies in the future will be able to incorporate in Bitnation instead of European law. So if they want to found their company, if they could do this while being here, but not having to pertain to the European law and just to the Bitnation like law that they have on Bitnation. Would that be possible? I think that's a question for you, Sonja and Kenneth, no?
Yeah. There are several aspects to it. Many other projects are trying in these, let's call them freedom projects. And it's definitely a goal, I think, for Bitnation to make it possible. We could all be inspired by Estonia, who have their e-citizenship, and to me, that's kind of a confirmation from a European Union state that it's actually possible to have a virtual citizenship and a virtual company. So definitely, I don't see any problems having it in the future.
Yeah, I would just like to add that probably from business people are one of their companies which will be registered on Pangea will be treated But I would say that I'm watching it maybe from the perspective that you can give your virtual identity to your company through Pangea. So you can have existing company and you can how you operate on daily basis in existing jurisdictions, but you can additionally have some virtual jurisdiction if your partner companies which you cooperate with are having the same identity, then you can have normal businesses and you don't have any interference of any jurisdictions, and you make your contracts based on Pangea jurisdictions, and any dispute you resolve through our arbitration network. So it's completely possible to upgrade your business, but this is just the beginning. Of course, now people are having their companies and entities established in all over the world, and maybe they're seeking for better tax solutions or going to offshores. But this is why the good example is Estonia, which is already offering some kind of location-independent business, and Pangea can offer even more, because we are not limited by regulations, which, for instance, Estonia has as a European Union member state, or any tax levels that have to that are obligatory to be paid as corporation tax on yearly basis. But this is how we will create that people can register their companies in every nation that is created, or society inside of Pangea will be able to demonstrate the power of a virtual jurisdiction, because this is the future. All of us are working less and less in the real physical world, and it is really enough that we practically have our computers and mobile phones, and we can arrange that everything can be done. So you don't need your state, and you don't need to follow all the rules if you can make agreement with your partners. And this is most important. And Pangea is here to give certain, as Erik already mentioned, legal certainty and some kind of framework which each and every groupation can fork in a way that they would like to have their own rules. So it's an open source project, and I think it brings the most freedom that we cannot even imagine it probably now, because we are too used to thinking in the framework of existing jurisdictions, and this way of freedom will still need some time to develop in our own way, and to spread among peoples and among companies, and to trust the system. And especially when you see that system is functional, because we are all suffering from bureaucracy in each and every country, and a lot of paperwork and constant problem to raise this to the level that we can focus on our work and goods and services, be drowned in some kind of and problems, in short.
Of course, also it's important to add that there's actually no problem whatsoever with Pangea and creating a problem. There is only a problem with 300-400 other countries. So what we're looking for is acceptance, the right to exist, and it is only governments who are preventing it. So since there's so many countries in this world, it's the same thing with the identification systems, that it will take a while to get them implemented, and the same thing will go with companies. Many people will probably face some, I don't know, tax evasion issues or something if you create a Pangea company actually doing business and making money. If I was doing this in my home country, which is Denmark, I would be punished with both the tax I was supposed to pay and a fine on top of it. It's tax evasion if I did it. So it's not so much often what we think about it ourselves. It is always about how a government would label what you're doing. And this is our perspective all the time, because we have to see it from the legal perspective in eyes of authorities.
So if I got it correctly before from our conversation, you said that Bitnation was already being used for real-world people crossing borders. Is it right?
No.
I heard in a previous conversation that people is already using Bitnation to cross borders. And well, the second question is, how do you enforce a resolution of some arbitration dispute? Yeah.
All right, Sonja, you can take the arbitration. What was the first question again?
Yeah, crossing borders.
Yeah, the question was whether Bitnation documents have been used before to cross borders, and yeah, how is that being done?
I'm actually not sure. I don't think so. At least not some more than some home tries with some ID cards, I think. But the attempt to make a passport that complies with all the other passports and will go through the machines in the airports, this has not been done before. But it has been done in Lillieholm, which is in the exact same situation when it comes to recognition. They're as little recognized as Bitnation is. And there, people have been able to do several things with their passport, including crossing borders. Most of the times, they would have to show their personal passport that they have from their own merciful government to get out of trouble. Some have passed solely using the Lillieholm passport. And the president himself got it stamped at the US border. So it's definitely possible, and it seems that you won't get in much trouble if you make sure to have your, let's call it, real identification with you.
So I also want to ask about that. So if you wouldn't have a European citizenship, would you be able to use the Lillieholm or Bitnation passport or paper to legally travel into Europe or the US?
No, you would definitely have to have your government issued papers with you. It's to us, the most important thing is that no one was punished yet for doing it. But this is exactly what can happen if you're only carrying a Bitnation or Lillieholm passport. And this is something we will try soon when we get the passports. I'm volunteering as the first person to cross some border with that passport, jail or not. This is what it's all about, testing it to the limits. And Sonja will get me out, right?
Yes. I will do my best. Yeah, regarding this second question about the enforcement of resolutions in our arbitration process, first of all, we have to define that the things and processes and that will be happening inside of Pangea are strictly inside of civil matters. So we are not talking about criminal law, and there is no possibility that Pangea can enforce anything, if any criminal procedure and some murders or such acts. So regarding agreements, we will make sure that the templates that we are creating as smart contracts that think ahead of all the possible issues and disputes between the parties in a way that the money will always be in escrow, and until the business is concluded, it will not be transferred, and each and every party will be able, or I don't know, we still didn't decide how will we form all this, but in a way, to resolve dispute, we will have a reputation built system, as Pangea arbitration token is used for that. So in order to operate properly on the Pangea jurisdiction, you will have your profile, and you will collect, like on Amazon or eBay, also your reputation. And if you will not follow the agreements that you make, you will just have bad reputation, and you will not be able to do business. And we are not enforcing like fines or anything from traditional systems. It is just that you lose your ability to be part of Pangea and part of Bitnation. And I think this is punishment, because we want to create a system that it's functional and open for everyone who doesn't have some kind of ideas to follow the agreement that it's making.
This is also part of the point, that when you have these nation states you can make, there is no constitution. And in many ways, we believe more in the agreement than in the law. To the extent someone wants to have a fine built into the system or a punishment, it has to be done in the contract. If somebody can be punished for being late with a payment or a delivery, put it into the contract. If you didn't put it into the contract, there's no agreement of punishment, and therefore it can't be. The arbitration process of it, if one comes to a point where the smart contract cannot handle the conflict, well, then the arbitration system will then take over.
So one thing to add, Sonja. Yeah, fair enough, your answer. But how do you prevent someone to creating a new identity in the nation and doing businesses again?
Yes, we are discussing this a lot. How to prevent people from creating like multiple identity and doing some improper business activities. But we still have to define how. This is more from security perspective, and I'm not in charge how the software will be operating and how will we manage to control that someone is not having 20 different identities and doing scams.
One way we're solving it is by having a fine or a high price for getting in as a new businessman in the system. And one could say that if you create multiple identities, it's actually not a problem, really, to the extent that you're not cheating anyone. It's hard work making good business and earning up a reputation. And this is why the reputation system is pretty brilliant. You get good reputation for doing good business. And one could say then that if a fake ID is doing good business, well, then it's not really a big problem, right?
I can add something to that we're working on a way to prove the, let's say, human existence of pseudonymous users, that they're not bots. So Johan Nygren, who was helping us with that, he created a concept that is called proof of individuality, where which is not only for Bitnation but could be used by anyone who is using pseudonymous identities for his profile, and at the same time wants to use the reputation, a trustworthy reputation system. So basically all pseudonymous identities, they're distributed in hangouts of 5 people, and this is like taking place every month. And they see each other, but they don't know who they are. So they just prove that they're humans, and it's just some sort of game where they give each other points. And the bots would only win if there would be 3 or 5 would be bots. And this way, like somehow they can verify if the majority is humans, and they will just verify each other's existence. In this way, you can prove that at least all the pseudonymous profiles are not, maybe they're the same person, but at least they're not bots. So yeah, that's one thing that might be integrated, and that's also being evolved at the moment to combine the element of pseudonymity, but as well a functioning reputation system, which would be impossible before. And also I wanted to add about the usability of all of this. So the same way that Bitcoin just gains worth by having more and more people using it, the same way Bitnation ID and documents will also gain more power, let's say, by having more people, like, by having critical mass using it. So essentially all changes in human history were always been done by a minority of people in every society, actually. So we just get this critical mass of people to start using this web of trust, a peer-to-peer governance society, let's say. We could start to give this more legal backing and more power when dealing with nation-state environments.
How about starting with like more simple services like merit certificates? I know you do.
I need to press the thing.
With merit certificates, like it would be more peaceful, I guess, to get nation states to approve these. You know, when you need it for a visa for your wife or whatever, that would be better for adoption of these virtual states, right? Virtual nations, because then you're not at risk of being thrown into prison or whatever. You know, so if you get the merit certificates to be approved by governments, then people will actually say, hey, we can get this, the virtual nations instead of the regular nations, will take a long time and cost a lot. And then people will maybe use your merit certificate because they know they can get approved and stuff. And that could, like in small scale, get it to be adopted, these systems, and then from there you could move on to ID and passports and all these other things. So just an idea.
So if I understood it right, the idea was to use one specific thing, like for example marriage agreements, and to have them recognized by nation states, and then from that to move onwards to other things, right? Or
yeah, just helping the adoption of your idea by using more simple and more peaceful services first.
Okay.
Nation states to approve these first.
So the idea is that you first try with the more easier to agree with governance services and try to get them recognized by governments, and then move onwards to others where governments might reject them immediately when we start with them.
Like for instance, we have idea to start with blockchain Bitnation marriage. And in a way that you come to the tax office, and as a couple that you seek for your tax deduction, and that you just bring proof that you're married on blockchain, and we will hear about their opinion. We will deliver the proof of technology completely with expertise in details, what is blockchain and how is data provided, and what does it mean, and timestamping, and in details, and we would like to hear the answer and explanation of each and every authority rejecting it, if they're rejecting, and because the way we are trying to form the blockchain marriage is that we satisfy the minimal formal requirements of two people who are entering the marriage. And it's not that that we're not thinking about all the details. We just want to somehow adjust in a way, and we will see the reactions, of course.
Yeah, because if the church can do it, then you can do it also, right?
Yes.
If the church is
we just use blockchain technology. We don't need priests.
Do you consider a Bitnation to be a cyber anarchist society? And if that's so, in an ideal world of Bitnation, no nation states exist?
So I can already say that we have no ideology. Like the only thing that we require of the virtual nations that are being created in our platform is that the membership is not obligatory. So you can at any time opt in and opt out. You do not force anyone to be part of your nation. You do not force people to stay in your nation. That's the only requirement. And apart from that, all the nations that are created through Bitnation are free to choose their own ideologies. They could also even resemble existing nation states if they wanted to. Like we see, for example, with Russia, Venezuela, and other nations starting to create their own cryptocurrencies. If they wanted to, they could also create their own virtual nations through us and compete with other nations on our platform. but they would not be able to force people to be their citizens. They would not be able to force people to have their citizenship. And they would have to compete with others in this market of governance services. And, excuse me, the second part of the question?
In the idealistic world of the nation states do not exist?
Yes, so we do not want, or we are not trying to destroy the existing system. We just try to build a new model that makes the existing one obsolete. We do not encourage, or we do not foster destructive activities. We just offer a new alternative, and we want to offer people who agree with us to opt out with us. But at the same time, we want to live in peaceful coexistence. We want the people to offer the opportunity to choose themselves what they like the best. We're not forcing anyone to be part of the Bitnation world. They can stay in the existing governance system if they want to. We just want to have the opportunity to try something new.
Add that I don't mind the term cyber anarchy. Bitnation has already been appointed as e-anarchy in a way that the regulators don't know how to approach it, and they're actually afraid, not in a way what it means now, but that actually it opens the whole new idea and what technology actually is doing, and how serious these movements can become and threatening to existing governments. The stronger and bigger we become, of course, there will be. But as we already said, we are not doing anything aggressive or deliberately to involve anyone who is not willing to participate. We all have freedom of choice, and we just want to create what none of the existing governments can offer us, and some credible alternative to governmental services. And we will do our best. Of course, it will be a lot of testing, a lot of work. We don't expect that the first iteration of Pangea will be the final solution. This is the beginning, and it is a good beginning. And we believe that in 10 years, maybe I can say, or 20, as the question was, that whether the nation states will become a question, it might happen. Maybe not too soon, but definitely the world will not be the same in 50 years like it is today. And the power of nation states is definitely getting lower.
Yeah, and I think we have to add also, there is one common rule, I guess, that defines the not ideology, but what you have to comply with. That's the non-aggression principle. That's the very basics of having a system like this. And to talk about that real quick, the non-aggression principle actually derives from the golden rule. Now, this is not going to turn into religion in any way, but religion has been a huge part of how human culture developed. And the non-aggression principle, who derives from the golden rule, that basically says an eye for an eye, but it can be used in a positive sense also. It is a concept that you cannot hurt anyone else, and you own your own production, you are entitled to your own body. The very basics of the non-aggression principle, and it have never been disputed in history of 2,000–3,000 years. Any religion that exists on this earth have never disputed the non-aggression principle, and that is also the very basics of doing Bitnation. It's a non-aggression principle project.
Hi, I've got a couple of questions. Do you hear me? I've got a couple of questions. First of all, what's your marketing strategy in order to reach more people in the future and make this thing even more popular? And the second question would be, I mean, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but is there any possibility that this project ends up like Silk Road? You know, they close that project and the guy is in jail. And I mean, I don't want to add any negativity to your project, but that's a possibility. Thank you.
Yes, so I can already add that for the marketing strategy, we will of course change the marketing strategy in the future. Right now we are more focused on, let's say, early Bitcoin adopters and people who already know how to use the technology, because we're still in a very early experimental stage. But as soon as we have a very user-friendly chat app interface that anyone can use in the world, and that also people in third world countries and that, yeah, of all languages can use, we will completely change the marketing strategy and make it, let's say, to target like a mass market. For example, we could focus more not on the let's say technology part that it's using blockchain or something like that. People don't need to understand blockchain it's like the money that you use in your wallet. You don't need to understand the central banking system to use euro. And the same way, you shouldn't have to understand blockchain technology, what is a mesh network, and all of these cryptographic layers. You shouldn't have to understand them to be able to use Pangea. No, in the future, you should maybe focus on let's say the flexibility that you are provided through Bitnation, that you do not have to stay in one geographic location to enjoy good governance services. You can live as a digital nomad and travel around the world and have access to the same services everywhere you go, and very quick and very cheap, actually, compared to the existing legal service. And yeah, we will of course think about that in the future, but I would say yes, we do have different marketing strategies now and in the future. And of course, regarding the second question of the comparison with Silk Road, so yeah, if Kenneth or Sonja, you want to comment on the comparison with Silk Road, with founders being detained?
Pangea is a beautiful tool for having an alternative to Silk Road, definitely. I'm kidding a little bit. It definitely have the same capabilities. But of course, it's no argument for not doing Bitnation. That the same thing with Bitcoins, right? They can be used for crime too. But the majority of users are investing in it and developing it. So I think the criminal, and that's also, that's of course only if you think that trading drugs is criminal. That it's not criminal to any constitution in Bitnation. So I guess we would have to accept it. And in that case, we at least know that the drug dealer can have a reputation.
I would also add to that everything we do is open source, and also in the case that, I don't know, we all die or we're all being detained or whatever, you would still be able to use all the things that we were working on because it's on the web, and it's an open source project. That means that you cannot kill it. It's on the internet. It's saved on the blockchain. You cannot delete the data that is hosted on IPFS on these individual nodes. And it's already out there. The idea is already starting to gain more traction. And if you use violence now, it doesn't make sense anymore, in my opinion. Like, if you would want to kill it, you would have to shut down the internet.
Let's say I'm a services. For example, let's imagine we have some customers from different digital countries. They want to go into a bar. This is a bar that actually a company that is registered in several different Bitnation countries. And my first question is, which law will apply of which country for which customers? You know, because I mean, I am a customer, I'm going to a bar, or which nation it will apply, which currency will be paid. For example, it could be a price in a specific nation, another price in another one. Will be because I will be part of one nation, I will be able to pay that price for this beer here. How how it's working? Is there really a top layer of law? For example, if you enter in the bar, you will respect this law of this hypothetical country, or is it the customer country that will, have in top of it? Is this simple logic of contract services? And just would like to know more about it.
Yeah, so I would say that first of all, Bitnation laws would only apply if the bar itself is registered on Bitnation, and then it would depend on the owner what kind of terms and conditions he is basically writing himself on Bitnation. So the clients will have to comply to the terms and conditions of the owner who is signing or who is registering his bar on the blockchain on Bitnation.
Just a very quick question. So why did you choose the term nation and not community? Because nation's got all these cultural things to it, which is language, which is everything. Community is much more neutral. And what about education in a Bitnation system of countries?
So first of all, about the phrasing, to use the word nation for what we are offering. So we want to make clear that we are offering a new solution comparing to the existing nations, and that we want to have the same recognition and the same, let's say, appeal to people as nations do. That we are not just some online community that is, let's say, hiding in the shadows, but that we are actually going out into the public, and that we want to have public recognition. Also, I would say a nation itself is the representation of a group of people. And if you look up the definition of nation on Wikipedia, I think it also doesn't include the words geographic territory or anything like that. It's just the representation of a large enough group of people who share several similar interests. It could be cultural, it could be economic, it could be many different interests. So I would say yes, nations can be digital, and yes, you could also say we are the Bitnation community of online people. But no, we choose the phrasing nation because we want to compete with the existing nations that exist in the world, but not as a forced one, but as voluntary nations. And what is the second part of the question, sorry?
How would education work in the future, in this ideal Bitnation world where there is only thousands of virtual nations? How would education work in terms of service? I mean, education, but then we can go on to health services and so on.
I would say that education could be provided by individual nations. There could be just one education nation. There could be one nation that just specifies on offering education services worldwide. And there could be also competing ones, and maybe individual citizens can say that they got some certificate or whatever, but this certificate would be independent from geographics or from governments. It would be basically like when you make an online course. You get some certificate that you achieved this level of education. And when you deal with other businesses, they can, for example, say, okay, if you want to do this and that, you need to achieve, have these, fulfill these and that requirements, and have these certificates that are stored on the blockchain and timestamped on the blockchain. So yes, the individual nations, they don't all have to have their own education system. No, you could have just individual education service providers. And the different nations, or also individual users of Pangea, you don't have to be part of a nation to use Pangea, by the way. They can choose themselves what kind of requirements they have for their agreements. They can choose, you need to have this and that certificate. But it's a voluntary process. It's something that is chosen by, like I said, the market of ideas. So, yeah. you don't need to have 1 million different education systems. No, you can just have a few one that specify in this, and then people use these online education services.
Erik, does anybody know, it's not called Khan University, I think? The YouTube educator?
Excuse me, what's the name?
I think it's Khan University. I was not prepared for this, but I was just thinking about it in regards to education. There's one guy who takes most education in physics and math and maybe even English. He takes it all the way beyond high school level on a series of YouTube videos. And I think this is one of the consequences of the internet. One thing is, how would we do education in Bitnation? But actually free education is kind of growing around us anyway. So you could make an education state or not. It's definitely something everyone is free to do, educate others.
Yes, of course, and we already do have MOOCs, like massive online courses. So you do already have education that is taking place online without having people move to one university. You can teach them online, and you already have I don't know, like for example for developers or for online marketing. I think for different areas there's already like certain recognition for online certificates that you don't need to have government's school certificates to have credibility in what you do. You can already get the same credibility through doing the same things online. And in many cases, people who taught themselves as autodidacts are actually more inclined and more motivated to do these things than when they were forced to learn these things in public schools.
The other aspect of it is the social aspect. Yeah, we know that all the new technologies bring among new services, the way we communicate and everything, but unfortunately in the end this also has a return effect on the ability of people to actually interact when they're in front of each other. If we are in just a virtual world, you know, how do we deal with this social life, which is actually, you know, when we grow up in schools, at the university, and that's what we make where we grow as a person, not only with virtual knowledge and everything. It's interaction which is then missing, but then you will have to recreate a type of system where you people can actually go to school. So it's kind of, for me, a liberal way of education system, a bit like the American one. You would then have a segregation of people who can't actually afford to send people to those schools, private schools, and then some others not.
Well, first of all, the online courses are for free, or many of them are for free, so it's not segregation where you have like rich parents and poor parents, and then you have this, no. But yeah, the very interesting question that I also ask myself sometimes, like if we go more and more digital and virtual, what actually happens to our socializing skills? Like our real physical presence just becomes less and less. We're all just on our smartphones. We're just becoming like blobs. We're not able to communicate properly. We're just writing emojis and chat interfaces. So yeah, this is actually one interesting question. So I think having virtual nations doesn't necessarily imply that it's only online. Like what we do right now is also a physical meetup, even though it came from an online movement. So we can have physical gatherings that are voluntary without institutions that are imposed on us. So we can still have schools, for example, but based on the wishes or on the demand of the people that they want to send their children to these kind of schools. It doesn't have to be uniform standards of schools like the government is imposing on us. It could be, let's say, a more diverse variety of schools, but there could still, of course, there would still be schools. And I think people also want to socialize, and it would be very sad if we all become like only virtual and don't have any physical presence anymore.
think it here's like a great tool to do community for persons abroad. So like if you're, for example, if you like, I don't know, you like electronics, and there is another guy from your electronics nation, maybe you two can meet, even if the guy is Russian and the other guy Indian or whatever. That would be a tool to socialize, wouldn't it?
You mean like for translating?
No. If you have similar, if you're from one nation, that means you're sort of a community, and you meet with someone who is from the same nation, that is from abroad, from other part of the world, you already have something in common.
So the comment is that these virtual services also allow people from different parts of the world to actually socialize, which they couldn't do before because they were geographically restricted. So now, using these online tools, they're actually able to have more social interaction with people from other parts of the world. It allows remote communication, which was not possible before. So yes, at the same time that we have maybe less physical presence because we're more online, on the other side, we have a bigger, let's say, social circle because we're able to communicate with people from people that are much further abroad than before.
Yes, I see a very important point what you said. So imagine that internet forums, no, are usually a place where a lot of people debate things and have a lot of things in common. No? So Bitnation could be like a legal entity for them. So imagine that you get like Reddit or something, no? You have a lot of people that they share a lot of things and they can, for example, negotiate for, I don't know, for healthcare or some contract, no? Do you have any examples or have you thought about it? Or?
Yep.
Can you share any?
So actually, what we do with Pangea is actually we give people who would do their agreements before in a, let's say, more handshake or informal way. We give them legal security that they didn't have before. So when they would do all these things online without any, any securities, they would just have to trust the other person on the other end of the world that they will send the money or that they will send the product. Like we do already when we order products online from the other part of the world. There's no government, there's no international government that secures you that you will receive your money or your product. You have to trust this person. But if you have smart contracts, if you use Pangea, you can actually have your money in an escrow, and in the case there's problems, you can actually have an arbitrator who will help you to either get your product or get your money if there was some problem. So yes, in a certain way, Pangea does give this, let's say, a legal backbone to this informal agreements that are done online in online communities, and at the same time give a more, let's say, public face to these, hidden online communities. Now they can actually get real representation by being a nation.
Another question. You said that joining Bitnation is voluntary. What about rejecting people from being of your nation? Can you do it?
So yeah, if you wanted to, you could also create a KKK nation, and you could be like discriminatory if you wanted to. But the question is whether these kind of nations will survive in this competition of voluntary nations. I don't think so, because in the end, I somewhere believe that people are good, and yes, they will exist and they will have some members and they can discriminate, but it's only online, and that's the good thing. They do not discriminate people from, let's say, moving to their country, because they do not have this geographical territory where they can impose their ideology on other people. They just have the online presence, and I think it's actually good that they live out their ideology on this virtual realm instead of the physical realm, because this way, okay, maybe they're together with like-minded people and they're racist, okay, but at least they do not create conflicts with people in the real world. So I think in a way that's also helping, that you give them this way to like ventilate their anger on this cyberspace.
Could you, like, in the current status of Bitnation, could you like create an elite nation? Like you can only join my nation if you own this money. It's an smart contract, no? You can prove that you own that money in Bitcoin, for example. No? And you do these kind of things, or is it just like, because I have been in your website and I found something called the Nations Directory, and it looked like very easy to join any nation. Like, okay, I want to join, and log in and click join. Or do some nations have some prerequisites to join it? Makes sense?
Yeah. So no, there's actually no prerequisites. You
cannot define any.
Like we have, let's say, one guide on how to create your nation that you should consider when you create your nation. But if you do not fulfill this, you don't have to. It's just one instruction manual. You don't have to follow it. It's just you could also do it in a completely different way. If you use our code and you do it maybe even outside of Bitnation if you wanted to, because the sources, the code is open source. Yes, there's no prerequisites, and but if you want to have citizens that join your nation, you should of course have a certain structure. You should have a constitution, you should have an economic system, you should have some services that people can use when they join your nation, because else why would they want to join your nation?
So let's imagine that this KKK nation exists. So let's say one individual likes to belong to this institution and so on, but then he doesn't feel anymore he wants to be of this nation. As this nation is in the blockchain, it's eternal, it cannot be modified. So what happens with him?
You mean that because membership is time-stamped on the blockchain, that it's not possible to opt out anymore because it's written, and but you could write on a subsequent block that this is not valid anymore. I mean, yes, there is a proof, and you can see that at one point he was member, but you will also see that he quit. So yes, for these public records, yes, it's true that there's also one problem, that there's no right to be forgotten, because you need to be really sure about what you do when it's time-stamped. But that's why also our communication, most part of Pangea, is not on the blockchain, but it's a mesh network that is heavily encrypted, so people actually do not know what you do, like in your internal communications. Only the like agreements and like the parts of business that have to be public, like the final like outcome of your agreements, who's the arbitrator, the decisions of a judge, the constitution, and all the like things that nations offer. These things should be public, of course. I think membership, I'm not sure if the membership of people is actually time-stamped or not, or if it's just in our mesh network. We would have to ask the developers about that. I'm not sure, actually.
Yeah, so what happens?
Excuse me, Kenneth?
It will be time-stamped one way or another.
So membership would be transparent.
Yeah.
But what happens if, for example, I'm part of the gay nation and I don't want everybody to know maybe my sexual orientation? So it must be public, it must be private, but the key of blockchain is to be public. So.
Exactly for that reason we have pseudonymous accounts. So that, for example, a gay couple in Iran can save their assets through a marriage contract, but do not have to publicly reveal their sexual orientation and be condemned by the governments. They can still have the same legal securities like they would marry in another country. So we do actually, for exactly this reason, allow pseudonymous identities and have this mechanism of proving that pseudonymous accounts are humans, just for this reason, that you can do things in a pseudonymous way. And still do it publicly. Yes, we actually encourage people to do many things. Like for some things, they would want to have them with their real identity, but with other things, they could have a separate account which is pseudonymous. So in this sense, it is actually good that you can have multiple accounts. Maybe because for some things, you don't want them, you don't want your government to know about them. So maybe for that reason, it would actually be good to have, yeah, also these fake accounts, like we said before.
You guys know better than all of us what Bitnation can provide. Thinking about the current situation here in Catalonia, how do you think the Bitnation could help people that are for independence in Catalonia or Pangea or any other nation?
Yeah, so we were actually doing a series of discussions just about that, about creating a Catalonia 2.0. So instead of waiting for the Spanish government to give the Catalans the permission to create an independent nation, they could just go ahead and create their independent nation step by step online and already start to do things independently from the existing Spanish government structure. So they could, in a slow way, of course, because they don't have the full government package like they have in the existing Spanish government, but step by step gain their independence by writing code. And that's the very fundamental idea behind Bitnation as well, to not wait for politicians to change things, but to write code that actually change the paradigm. So, yeah, Catalan independistas can help Bitnation to offer these tools also for themselves to be able to claim their independence online.
What would be the steps that you would say?
Yeah, the steps, of course, would be first of all, like what we're doing right now. First of all, have the very essence of who you are, an ID, to have identification, who you are, and to be able to show yourself as a Catalan citizen. Then the reputation, to be able to have a functioning economy and to do trade agreements, you need to have a reputation mechanism. So you need to have functioning reputation, what we're doing also at the moment. And the next thing would be able to, when you do agreements, to be able to resolve disputes, and this is what we're doing as well. So this is like the very fundamental things that any government needs to provide. And starting from then, you can start to go into different, what we call D-apps. So Bitnation will be a platform where people can create their own governance services based on what they think they need in their local environment. So it could be local health insurance, or it could be a worldwide one. Actually, all the services that are done on Bitnation, maybe they were created for local problems, but you can scale them on a global basis because the Bitnation is designed this way to offer things worldwide and without borders. And yeah, so you would step by step create health insurance, unemployment insurance, and there would be different people working on different things and all over the world, not just here. And essentially, it would not be only for Catalans. Maybe they would create their own virtual nation where they have this requirement that you need to be born here. But essentially, when they contribute to this development, it would help not only themselves, but all kinds of secessionist movements also all over the world to be able to reclaim their sovereignty. That's why Bitnation also calls itself the Internet of Sovereignty, because this is what we actually give. We give people the opportunity to opt out, and this is what makes them sovereign.
How do the governments can fund themselves? If you're competing to offer a service, you have to offer. So how do you, and today it's based on taxes, how is it in the nation?
So it depends on the individual nations how they want to have their business model, let's say. You could say that the nation would have a business model basically on how to make revenue for their citizens. So, for example, Johan Nygren, also who I mentioned before, he is working on a voluntary taxation code, where basically instead of paying taxes every month on a fixed basis, you just pay taxes every time you make a transaction, you choose yourself how much, what percentage you want to pay in voluntary taxes. And depending on the next person, on how much taxes that person also pays into this system, you will get an immediate dividend, which is like a basic income. And the same way that this is designed, it could be also designed for health insurance and other insurances. So you would, instead of having an incentive through force and through violence, that if you don't pay taxes you go to jail, you have actually a positive incentive of, if you pay taxes you actually get something back. You get like this kind of services. So you have a complete different incentive network, and this could be one model on how a nation could offer their services through this kind of voluntary tax network. But they could also do it like any other company, to just charge the money each time they offer the service on demand. So they wouldn't. They would have a small margin, of course, to for the network and to keep the thing to keep the whole nation running. And for all the other services that they do, they would make these decisions themselves. So every founder of a nation himself needs to think of a sound economic model, so he can provide these services for his citizens on the long run.
And the citizen who unfortunately is not skilled, who has nothing to offer, which can happen, how is this person going to benefit from such a system if they cannot be paying into it?
So one interesting thing is that 1/3 of all the tokens that we create with this PET token that I didn't mention earlier, but this is like a token that is used for arbitration services to create smart contracts and so on. That 1/3 of all these tokens, they will not be sold, but you actually earn them through things that you do, like through bounties or through doing other things. So actually also, if you have no resources, but you have somehow a phone and you have internet access, you will be able to still earn tokens and be able to participate in this network. And I think there will still be voluntary charities, for example, for the poor. But that's a different question on how, on how the disabled people, for example, would live without social aid by governments and so on. I think there will be voluntary systems and insurances that will help these kind of people.
Based on good faith.
Yeah, basically this whole network is based on good faith, that people are able to make good decisions.
Don't you think this kind of nations, let's say, supposing a big nation of Catalans, are tightly have tightly relation to cryptocurrencies? So in case there is a nation and there is a currency, it is already more powerful than a nation without currency. So a currency is like a deterministic, a very powerful way of setting a nation on the existing world.
So again, I didn't understand. The question is that the virtual nations don't have as much power because people can choose themselves what money they want to use, or what?
Yes, I think if the nations use currencies, then they can be more powerful and existing than if they don't have currencies. At the end, currencies is what moves the world. So I think.
But look, I think I also said before that the virtual nations created on Bitnation, that they will also have the tools to create their own currencies, actually, as ERC20 tokens. So they could all have their own sub tokens, and they would have the means to provide them. So they would actually have a currency that their citizens will use, who want to use them. And yeah, I think it's better to have a voluntary system where you can choose yourself than to be forced to use euro, dollar, or whatsoever, and then have all the, let's say, implications of that. That because you have to use this money, you will also be forced to do whatever they tell you, basically, because they control you through their money.
If Catalans had their own cryptocurrencies, they would not pay any taxes to the Spanish government. At the end, that's what independence is about. Well, I believe partly. Yeah, well, I think it will be a really powerful tool.
Yeah. So yeah, in the end, it comes about this question of taxes, and I think in a way, like when you are able to offer services that the government doesn't provide anyways and do them in a better way, I think these virtual nations rather deserve these voluntary taxes than the nations that fail to deliver services with their intransparent tax system, where you don't even know where your money ends up in. And with Bitnation, you will see in a very transparent way how the funds from the escrows are actually used. And it will probably also be demanded by citizens to have reports, just like in public companies, for example, to see what is being done and how their contributions are actually. You can, through the blockchain, follow the transactions, and that's also one interesting thing. Also outside of Bitnation, what will also change our existing world is because public companies, politicians, political parties, they will all in the future be forced to be completely transparent through blockchains about their donations and about also about this expenditures. Like they will not be able to falsify all of these flows of money because people will want to have transparency. Yeah, so the comment was that basically all the Catalans who join Bitnation and who would, for example, be citizens of Catalonia 2.0 DBVN, of a virtual nation, that this could also be used for a referendum, and what we see today, that this would be also a much more transparent process of gathering the votes than having to go to ballot boxes and to fight that they're not being confiscated by the police.
But is anyone doing something about it now? Is someone taking the lead on it in Spanish people?
I remember that on the day of the referendum there was actually that the Catalan or that parts of the municipalities were using IPFS to actually store the votes or the counting of the votes. So even if the Spanish government would shut down the informatics ministry and the servers were shut down, they would still have the votes. And but eventually, like I think they did this censo. So people who wanted to make themselves like able to vote, they would have to do this online, so they could vote not only in their local city but also in other places. So they did this actually through IPFS, but I think the Spanish government shut down the gateway to this IPFS server, and people couldn't open the server through a command line, which mostly only developers or hackers know how to do. So that was like the major obstacle, I think.
Would it be possible to contact these Catalan government people who are in charge of this movement? Would it be possible to contact them and then start Catalonia 2.0 and then have this develop the nation and get everyone IDs to demonstrate how big it is?
Yeah, so the comment was that the leaders of the Independentista movement, they could actually join Bitnation and use this transparent platform to show the number of people that is behind them and to have a very transparent and public way of representing their voice in front of the Spanish government. At the moment, we do not have anyone taking lead on this, but I think this will go faster as soon as we actually launch the software, because right now we're still in the development stage. And for the public sale, which will probably start in the end of January or beginning of February, we will release like the first MVP, minimum viable product, and then from there on be able to offer more and more of these services. And I think when we actually have the physical, like tangible services, then we can talk more about giving this to these movements.
Could you make loads of pseudo identity?
Excuse me?
Couldn't you just do like a load of pseudo identity?
Yeah, the comment is that also this Catalan movement, they could also just create a lot of fake identities to make it look like bigger movements. So you would have to have probably a proof that it's not the pseudonymous accounts, but you would have to show that it's probably like an account with a real name, and to show the I don't know if it has to be biometrics. There should be different ways of showing the validity of these users.
Do you use fingerprint or something when IDs?
I think we are very much against using biometrics on the blockchain because that would lead to more racial discrimination, because you could use this biological information to filter out like all different kinds of people, and we actually want to keep it as neutral as the technology allows, and not to use like biologic filters on people based on their biometric information that is stored on the blockchain.
But if those in charge of this movement say, okay, we need to be sure that everyone are who they say they are, and they will choose in their...
If they insist on it and they know how to program it, we would have the basic code anyways, so they would probably do it themselves. So
everything is possible to make it unique.
I guess so. I don't know. I'm not, let's say, the technical lead on that, but
I think it could be only maybe not biometric, but a kind of technology that keep the information private, but just make the validation of the ID. You know, it could be facial recognition, it could be a lot of technology, even more combined in itself, but on a way that actually is not possible to show it in the blockchain, not public information, even still is a public account, and just validate that it's actually a real account, something like this.
So the comment was that you could also gather this biometric information privately, and to use these tools to show that people are actually real people. But I would say if you do things on the blockchain, it will not be private. Like, it will obviously be public. So you would have to use a different mechanism, or use I don't know, private blockchain. But still, there would always be the danger of being hacked. And then when this information is being leaked, then it could be used against you. So if you have no more comments, I think we can close for today. Right. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming.